Welcome back to For the Love of Humanity, Season 3, Episode, I think 5. I'm jumping in with an impromptu episode because I was reflecting on the past 4 years. We're at a leap year moment. Tomorrow is February 29th, which is leap year. And leap years, as you know, occur every 4 years. And I'm working in this mastermind, and it's asking me to reflect on the 4 year period that I've just come through. So, of course, I decided to pull out my journals and have a little look back to what I was feeling 4 years ago. And my channeling has been getting clearer. My intuition has been just growing over the years. And these are things that I'm noticing as I read back in my journals. A lot of the intentions and wishes that I was bringing through that felt less grounded back then are all over the journals. So I'm going through these journals, I'm reading them, I'm reflecting right now on the context I want to set for the next 4 years. I'm also aware that astrologically, I've just closed at a 15-year cycle. So just a lot of reflection, right? 15-year cycle puts me at 2009. This is like a year after I gave birth to my first child, after being married, buying a house, buying 2 dogs, doing the whole family thing. So realizing that from 2009 till now, how completely different my life is, completely different in so many ways. Like, in so many ways, it's insane. I'm living in a totally different place, and it's beyond the expectations I even had then. It's so interesting because I was only conscious of like 1/10 of the expectations, I was only conscious of 1/10 of the life that I could have. I only anticipated life getting so good at that point, just because I had such a track in my mind of what it was supposed to look like. And it's so interesting because I'm here, and to reflect back, hindsight has given me the wisdom of how important it is to release your limitations. And it's interesting because so astrology I love because it gives me these levels to reflect. So on the one level, I'm reflecting 15-year cycle ending, and that's really profound. And on another level, I'm looking at this leap year that's talking about the last 4 year cycle, which has been huge. And it feels like another energy overlay, like another imprint overlay of life that's had its own trajectory that's still within the 19-year period, but it had a distinct feeling, a specifically distinct and different feel. It was like, going for a whole book, and then this last chapter was such an interesting chapter, and it feels like there's a new book starting. Even though that book is like another 15-year cycle, another 4 year cycle. And then I've got this other astrological reflection that is taking just a snapshot from Friday. Was it a new moon or full moon? The new full moon in Virgo, Friday, and reflecting over my journal since Friday and since like last week. And just, it's so crazy because it feels like a condensed amount of experiences and lessons really took form and really took clarity. And they're lessons that have been reflected throughout the 15-year time. They're lessons that were more specific to the 4 year period that I'm reflecting on. And it's so interesting that I got several of them. And I'm learning to celebrate more and more the little things, or the little things that are actually very big things. I'm learning to celebrate this a little bit more, to acknowledge it more, because as a Capricorn sun, sometimes I just keep trotting up the hill, trotting up to the next plateau or the next mountain peak without actually stopping to be like, whoa, holy smokes, this is huge. This is huge. This is big for me. These moves are making the change that I was seeking, which is why I think it's so wonderful to go back and reflect on my 2020 journals and my 2021 journals. And so many, like, I recorded my dreams so much then, and so many prophetic things that I was recording in dreams that I'm like, oh my goodness, that happened this year, that happened last year, that happened this week. Very, very interesting. So very interesting. So anyway, if that is not a sales pitch on take up journaling because it helps you clarify. Now, if you're interested in Myers-Briggs and you have any knowledge of that, I was certified Myers-Briggs, loved using it as a modality, loved using it as a profiling tool, understand the, drawbacks of it, understand the arguments of its flaws. Uh, I'm a fan of Jungian psychology, and this is where it stemmed from, and the categorization of types. And I recently revisited it, but from a more Jungian perspective. So I've been chipping away at the Red Book for a few years now, and always like the layers and layers and layers. And sometimes reading it, falling asleep, and going back to what I read and feeling like, oh my goodness, I got so much more the second time. But in the Red Book, he sort of talks about the different polarities, like the extroversion, introversion, big picture thinking, detail thinking, feeling versus thinking, judging versus perceiving. And it's interesting because what came to mind was that I'm very aware of my feelings. I can understand those as they come up. I feel them, I'm aware of them, they're close to the surface, I'm conscious of them. My thoughts felt a little more tricky because I introvert my thoughts. I am an ENFJ. I say I am an ENFJ, but I understand the power of my I am, and I'm not attaching too deeply to any one modality either, because I understand that I am so much greater than all those things. I'm so much greater than a personality assessment. However, for the sake of giving an example and a tool, ENFJ. And so what I extrovert is my feelings, but what I introvert is my intuition. And this is so funny because I learned this back in 2007 when I was pregnant, taking this like certification course. So understanding that I introvert my thoughts made a lot of sense because they always seemed a little bit slippery. It was harder to see my thoughts. So journaling, long sales pitch here, journaling has been so incredible at allowing me to see my chain of thoughts. And even today, as I'm reflecting on as I said, the full moon from Friday till today, I'm going over notes in my journal and like rereading what I wrote down. I had this challenging situation that I was trying to work through. I had this, back and forth with myself, this experience that was in my external, but obviously everything in the external is a mirror for something that you're feeling, right? So I journaled all the things I was feeling and I just put the notes out. And at first I'm thinking like, oh, this is so inefficient. I can't be doing this every time I come up against a little irritation or a thing that I don't like, or an emotional relational thing that I have to address or deal with. But I like brain dumping because then I can achieve clarity. And then I realized that even though I think this is not sustainable to do every time I have a frustration, I won't be doing this every time. I was like, I can't be doing this every time. And the reality is I won't be doing this every time. But it's easier to see certain things when you journal them out. And it's a process that probably will just be a temporary process. So it's just to see for me, for my learning. It's for now, not forever. Right. So I journaled these like all these points that were just scrambled in my head. And today I got to highlight them and look at, oh wow, like here's the aspects of self that I enjoy, and this is what I want out of it. I want it to feel like this. And I also don't want to go into this old behavior. And I'm realizing where I have conscious choice in this experience where perhaps in the past I didn't. And I see where I'm looking at the other person's feelings and not wanting to necessarily have them totally influence my decision making, but I'm proud at the fact that I have compassion, right? So that's really nice. And going back to the other point of, yes, it is my conscious choice still, which is wonderful. And then seeing like the points that can just be clarified, that there wasn't any wrong. And then I'm seeing like, I've got them listed like 1 to 10 or 1 to 15, all the little swimming thoughts. And one of them was like, perfect. This is my past. I can see the past here coming into the future, and wonderful. And it's great that I can acknowledge that. And within that past, I'm like almost rebutting. It's almost like a channel call answer. So I'm channeling the problem and then I'm channeling the answer. And it was really wonderful because I got to see what I wanted. I was problem solving as I went. It wasn't just like feeling stuck with a situation and feeling frozen. And it's interesting because I was going back and forth between old stories and new solutions, which is wonderful to see that vacillation, to see that, experience. Um, and then in the end, just sort of affirming for myself, like it's not a big deal, and knowing it'll work out, and knowing that things get fixed, and knowing that it's a wonderful thing to walk through. And it's actually not that big of a deal to even walk through in the first place. But it shows me where I'd been holding off certain actions and activities because the thing felt bigger. And it felt bigger because I had a list of 10 things that were swimming around. So I couldn't feel clarity. And I couldn't feel clarity because I couldn't think clarity. I couldn't think clearly. And journaling helped me. And it's wonderful. And especially when you're building trust with your intuition and you're building, like, sure, we can make decisions very quickly based on clarity, intuitiveness, decisiveness. We can follow that road. But when we've got past programming or past memory stuff swimming around, sometimes we do have to tweeze it out because it'll keep influencing until we see it for what it is and let it dissolve or become diffuse. So this is the place I find myself now, and it's really liberating and it's really fantastic. And I mentioned channeling earlier because writing has helped me develop my channeling, or at least get clear on it. I've always been channeling. I always have been sort of an impromptu speaker, and in the activity of speaking with another person or in my classes, the question would solicit a feeling, a vibrational feeling, would solicit a version of me that was able to get completely out of the way and bring in the highest possible answer that I could give that would benefit the most clear, the highest to the truth that I could reach. And this is what channeling is. Like, you clear your stuff, you clear your persona, you clear your personality out of the way enough, to be able to bring in an answer that is clear enough, that is, and your ability to bring in clarity is your ability to sort of get out of the way and bring in what's the highest truth I can access, what's the highest truth I can make available to answer this person's question or to solve this challenge. And that has been one of my gifts. It's just something that comes very easily to me, especially when I'm in a situation where I've been able to elevate myself into okay, I'm here for this job, this role. This is what I'm here to do. I take it seriously in the sense that there's not really a big part of my personality that needs anything with it. It's literally just, oh, there's a problem, I can solve it. I lock into this higher state of me that isn't doing it for the accolades. It's doing it because I'm super into solving problems. And it's funny because it's all over my human design, cycle, left angle cross of cycles, 5-1 challenge solver, problem solver, like determination, the ability to take a project, start it, see it through, to see complex problems and put them into simple terms, like all of this. And it's so funny because in those moments, I truly do feel like clear water. Like it's not personal. It's just the act of solving the problem in itself is so fulfilling for me. So these are the things that I'm coming to terms with. These are the things that I get more confident on. These are the things that I'm experiencing now, and it feels so good. And I get to reflect back on the last 4 years and say, whoa, I did not feel that steady then. I did not feel that solid in this before. And so as I'm flipping through my pages in my notebook, I found this poem, whatever. I called it The Story of Surrender. And I wanted to read it because I think it's helpful, and it's a little obscure and it's a little abstract, but I think if you sit with the energy of it or you sit with the words of it, something is for you here. I just know it. I had an impulse to read it. So in the beginning of this sort of experience, I'd say in 2020, I had a pattern or a cycle of sort of feeling open, feeling like I got some intuitive hits, doing some things, and then coming into cycles of white knuckling it. So every time I had to go to like the void or go to stillness or go to the point of transformation that feels like it's at the base of the circle, I would panic and I wouldn't really know what was going on. And then all my patterns of like making myself wrong and what the heck is going on and life is a scary place and this like malfunction, red alert, like all the alarm systems going off. And then I'd get so tired and then I'd be depressed. And so all of those cycles, when they happened, when I wasn't fully conscious of them being cycles, they felt so like being pulled in the undertow and just like sort of drowning. But then when I came to recognize, oh, there's a rebirth that always happens, and I always get my power back, and I always feel strengthened again. But the self-deprecation or the wrongness or the panic or the white knuckling it that would happen right before, during, and sort of the unsteadiness, the Bambi legs that, again, I wasn't so sensitive to myself for as I came out of it, those would always end up extending some of those periods. And what they showed me was that I wasn't paying attention to the way I saw the process or how I handled myself through the process. I did not handle with care. I did not know to handle with care. I was still living in very masculine energy of just push through, get it done. These are the norms. This is the rules. This is the life I live within. I was very much subject to the cultural and social rules and norms of the time, as opposed to understanding that those are human made. I am a human being. We all are human beings with the right to be here and the right to self-determine. And other people's perspectives, limitations, rules, ways of doing things aren't necessarily law. That there are greater laws, the universal laws, and I've talked about this a few times, and there are greater things at work and at play. And if I could reach for those, if I could just connect up with those, I would feel a little more entitled to my sovereignty. And so 2020 was like huge time for sovereignty. I think probably 2018, 2019, 2020, like coming into that was a huge, what's sovereignty? What does it mean? And then with 2020, it really ramped up. I mean, the fear generally in the world in 2020 was very triggering for me. And I didn't realize how much fear, worry, control I had just latent sitting in my system. And then I also didn't realize that in the midst of purging that or going through that or dissolving it, allowing the feminine to dissolve it, becoming an alchemist and dissolving the density and like taking the gold and separating the wheat from the chaff and, decomposing, creating the best fertilizer. Like I did not realize that natural innate process, maybe not enjoyable, but safe and okay. And that I didn't have to think there was a huge problem, a huge panic. I didn't have to beat myself up over it or have expectations that it look a certain way or that I get out of it in a certain way. And that demonstrated an even deeper layer, the relationship I had with myself, the relationship I had with my body, the relationship I had to the information and knowledge I was getting. I could not access any higher levels of knowledge while I was continuing to ignore parts of myself, while I was continuing to dislike and cut off parts of myself, while I was continuing to chastise, bury, or compartmentalize parts of myself. I could not access ease, grace, flow, the feminine qualities while I was not surrendering to the feminine experience, to the trust of the flow, while I was so, concerned about the feeling and the wrongness of the feeling of feeling uncomfortable feelings, like, oh God, I hate discomfort. I never wanted, like, just being low key traumatized by discomfort. And like, I'm not just saying discomfort, like apathy, like deep, what is the point of being here? There is so much horrific going on, basically being pulled in the undertow, like noticing the world was drowning while I'm trying to swim and starting to feel tired and just being like, oh my God, like just letting go. We're all drowning. Who is able to surf here? Nobody. So coming to all that, realizing that there needed to be a fundamental shift in my relationship with myself and the way I saw myself and the way I attended to challenges and problems. I couldn't just continue white knuckling it, gritting teeth, and just like running as far as I could, as fast as I could. I couldn't rely on my rebellious nature to bust me through problems, because there was another version that was longing to be considered, that was longing to have life that was longing to be experienced. And it was stuff that I'd been asking for the whole time. Like, can it be easier? Can it? And I got a taste of it when I had my children, when I walked into motherhood. Like, can't it be simply like this? There's so many analogies that would come up for me. I was taking my yoga teacher training. Oh yeah, I've got certificates on certificates for things that I just realized I wanted to learn myself on a very in-depth level. But that was fundamental for me. Change, like the changes. This was 2011, 2012. It helped me through postpartum depression. It helped me see some depths. It has evolved and brought depths to me now in my present moment that I wasn't fully able to integrate then, because my expansion, my consciousness it was opening, but wasn't what it is now. And so understanding I needed to have that relationship with myself to be able to, this was the work. This is the work, right? Bringing yourself to a point where you pass the baton off to the higher self, and the higher self is integrated and it is you, and you're living from that. And knowing that that's a rebirthing cycle that can happen continuously throughout your life every time you want to expand and grow. And it can happen in micro ways, like every time you walk towards a difficult situation, journal it out, release the past, decide what you want in the present and the future. It can happen in those ways, and it can happen in a complete leveling of your personality and your experience and the way you decide life gets to be, or what you think you get to decide. Like the realm of control you think you have, or the realm of decision and influence and intent you think you have. I realized I don't necessarily have the control that I think I have. It's different, but I have control over perspective, and I have my intent. And perspective and intent are so powerful. They're so powerful in the design and creation of your world. So these are some things that I've got a beautiful handle on now, that back then I didn't really even know what I was bringing in when I was asking for to be happy and satisfied, and to know there's another way, and to know that I can have joy and I can enjoy it. And the first thing that happened, funnily enough, was that I just kept noticing people who had it already. And I would tell other people this, and they'd be like, well, you don't know what happens behind closed doors. And I don't. But at the same time, there's just something that feels different. You can feel it. And as I developed my intuition, my energetic skills, I could feel when people fully had the full bodied wholeness of that vibration versus it's shaky and they've got it in this situation, but they don't have it in other ones, versus, oh, they've watched a few people who live like this and they're just sort of putting on a veneer and trying and faking it till you make it, which again, I don't knock any of that, because we got to practice, right? But as I said, energy doesn't lie, and you can feel the depth to which somebody holds the belief, and when the belief dips into knowing, which is unshakable. And so there were a lot of things that I knew I wanted. And then I was faced with people who actually had them. And then I was faced with the ability to feel that they had them for real. And then I was faced with the ability to feel when people didn't have it for real. And then I was faced with having compassion for that and not judgment. And then seeing my own judgment, and seeing how the ways I spoke to myself and the lack of patience I had. And then when I got all these beautiful spiritual tools and helpful mindset tools, then, personal development tools, and not using them against myself in the most aggressive way. Like, oh, this is for your own love. This is for your own benefit. Like, let's do the work, but like, I'm going to be judging the whole time with the same, judgment that I'm trying to not have for everybody else, but sneakily I have it on myself. There was just very interesting ways in which I was shown all of the lack of self-compassion and the lack of connection I had. And somatic work did so much for me, so much for me. Breath work did so much for me. And I'm looking and I'm smiling because I started journaling hardcore in 2019. And then I could see the phases where I gave it up for a bit and then I came back to it, but mostly every day. And I could see where I picked up breath work and how unbelievable I thought it was in the beginning, and where I kind of left it for a bit and then picked it up again, got certified in somatic breathwork coaching. Loved it, but wanted to learn it in depth. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it every day, all day, love it. So these tools very much helped me. But I had to wiggle them into my experience so that they felt the way they were supposed to and they did what they were meant to do. I couldn't just copy and paste somebody else's practice and think that it was going to be the silver bullet for me. So reflecting back 2020 to now, this is like from, let me see, 2021. So this is about a year into that cycle. And when you ask for something, things start conspiring around you to create that result. But in the beginning, you might think it's going to look like, oh, the gifts come, the abilities come, they just show up, and then you just practice them like a wand gets delivered at your door in Harry Potter, and you just start learning how to use it. But it's not always like that. It might be like, well, what's in the way of you receiving that? Okay, well, first it's going to show up at your door, but in a different way, and it's just going to keep chipping away at the hard walls and belief systems and all the crud that's in your pipe that's stopping you from receiving this. So for the first little while, you might feel very downtrodden. You might feel very distraught at the fact that, what am I getting? This just seems like bucket loads of crap to deal with, sludge. And then eventually the window cracks open a bit and you get to see some things, and you get to see that the synchronicities and why things are coming together the way they are. And then you get to see how you attract the things, and you're grateful for attracting the things because they're clearing the system out. And then you attract something that feels like real crappy. And you're like, I'm not so grateful for this. How did I attract this? I didn't actually attract this. Sometimes you can't even hold that perspective. You forget until a week later and you're like, oh, right. I do believe that I'm asking for something. So everything in the way of that thing, everything in the pipeline ahead of that thing has to get sort of pushed through. It's like the old Play-Doh in the Play-Doh machine, the crusty old Play-Doh. It's got to get pushed out before you put the new Play-Doh through the press to make the hair or whatever the Play-Doh press makes for you. So in reflection, I have this poem, as I started to talk about earlier. It's called Lay It Down, and it's a story of surrender. It's a poem. I'm going to read this, and it's in handwriting, and I've read through already once, but hopefully I don't butcher it. So instead of, this is me coming to terms with my hands on the wheel, white knuckling and channeling for myself. So usually it's very easy for me to channel for other people. So very easy, especially if I'm in the mindset of like solving their problems, like a Rubik's Cube. They hand me the Rubik's Cube. I talk to them. I show them why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I hand it back. And usually an epiphany happens, or they feel like a knot unties, or like an epiphany, just like they feel like they've decongested. Something has decongested, and they can smell clear. And so this is an act of me doing it for myself, and I had to do it for myself in written form because I had so many hazy thoughts that would get in the way. My own hazy thoughts would get in the way until I wrote it. So there are moments or seasons where the space around can feel so suspended, like suspended chaos. Time has the feeling of heavy stuckness. Realization and grounding, it can feel stuck. I get to feel into the etheric structure around me and how it interacts with the structure of my own field. Life always has something to show. For the ones that are thirsty for adventure, for the adventure into the awareness within, this is a season of appetite. This season seems to come after the shock of grounding and stillness and realization. The backward free fall off of the cliff into the inky waters, being conscious enough to focus on the objective point of view, i.e., detaching from belief and programming. So there is an opportunity for objectivity or vantage from the observer position. To be stopped and held long enough to still is a remarkable fertilizer. Is it a remarkable feeling after long moments of spinning? Retrospection requires stillness, prolonged and persistent stillness. Diving into the inky water or going into the desert provided the stillness for the still shot that can remind us of our blueprint. Coming into the 0 point field is a deep dive into suspension. This place can be unnerving. The quiet can be deafening at first. Sounds of cicadas to the point of surrender. Consciously being in this place is intense. There is nowhere to start, and yet all is in this void, which can turn into a desert that feels confusing, lifeless, meaningless, and at times a place of apathy, where it feels like we're just walking for days and days and days, wandering, not even knowing if we're on the right path, not knowing which way is up, not knowing the direction. Finally, the attention is inward, the focus on the inner landscape of perception, response, intention, and the binary outlook switch, ascension, stagnation, toggling back and forth. Am I moving forward and up? Am I being held still? Deep skepticism, lack of self-understanding are the layers to shed on this journey. Now it's a journey. I recognize this. I see the sequence. From surrender came meaning. There was no meaning before this. At least I couldn't feel it. Meaning grew in secret, in the ethers, connecting with the heart to take root. This place is slippery. Skepticism and ignorance are a tricky combo, hence stillness, consciousness, focus, present awareness. Eventually, old structures, residue of old belief patterns, and layered experiences start to lift. Various other bodies, physical, mental, energetic, start to purge, cleanse, and shed. You know this. A crack is how the light gets in. Conscious awareness explores the area, drilling deep. Fresh waters spring to quench some of the thirst for simplicity, the thirst for contentment. From that place of self-love grows and sprouts a lush jungle. But this is slow, and it doesn't happen right away. Interactions with others during this time seem to feel both intoxicating and raw. Social anxiety took the place of generalized anxiety. From social interactions, understanding and misunderstandings add rich fertilizer to the jungle that was greeting the desert. Although there was a stillness, a thick mud-like experience, there also came variance in the day-to-day. I can feel again. I can feel little by little. A shift from the macro to the micro and back, the future, the distant, the external, the daily micro, the internal forces, a different surrender that calls upon the voice of expectation, judgment, to become even louder so as to be heard, identified, understood, and received. And relieved of service. So seeing the voice of judgment and expectation and criticism had to become louder to be understood and relieved of service. Put a pin in it. I'll revisit later. But the later is now. Everywhere the now is. Everywhere the now is. There's no escaping it. Synchronicity, conscious awareness, awareness of awareness as a function, but not fully understood, and consequently undervalued, underused, underexperienced, and underpracticed. Awareness of awareness is an exercise worthy of note. As mentioned before, judgment, self-doubt, skepticism, the voices of others, social customs, come to roost. The pin is out, and the reckoning is here. Awareness of such lenses, irritants, factor were not fully understood. Therefore, their co-impact was not understood, or furthermore, misunderstood as personality. To reckon with the masks, shield, multi-layered versions is the way through to the next step. There's no jumping over this. At this point, the door is gone. The launch pad is a steep cliff. The river and the desert is the scene above the scene of daily life. Building a bridge from you now to you future. From you to higher self, source, God. From the desert back to reality in the material world. From the desert to presence. There is no going back. The only choice is to rest, heal, build, or stagnate. The relearning, objective self, observation, self-love, learning what is forever, learning that we are forever adapting, that we are forever expanding with each experience, learning compassion for others as a spontaneous byproduct or a continuous conscious practice. Keep going, keep walking, keep loving, or don't. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you slip. Sometimes you slip into an old pattern. When you wake up again, you will have more fertilizer. One day at a time, one task at a time, one interaction at a time, one belief or pattern, purge at a time. The stillness is helpful. The stillness is comfortable. The stillness is safe, solace, heaven. This is hermiting. Building the interior dwelling, landscape, palace, or ecosystem. This takes time, love, patience, and commitment. Ears to hear, eyes to see. Eventually, it becomes the favored place, especially if it has been newly activated, newly cultivated, depending on the disposition towards external awareness. Be still and know that I am. Hermiting has its own ups and downs, ranging from comfort to reclusivity, peace and quiet, to deep processing the old versions and choices, along with the painful memories requesting release. By comparison to previous journeys where I was largely unconscious or less conscious, this space didn't always feel like peace. With repetition comes familiarity and framework, understanding. This too, everything changes, everything shall pass. That knowing is critical, an antidote to petrification. And that's the end. I didn't really have a nice little tagline on the end there. But even when I think about that, this is a process, it is a phase. And it's interesting. I'm reading this book right now that talks about this healing journey as peeling back the layers of an onion. And it's something that we have to go through. It's something that we do to understand the process. It's something that we do to understand the process so we don't get freaked out when we find ourselves in the middle of the process. And it's something that we do so that we can recognize where we are in the process and navigate our way through the process of transformation. And I do want to say that there comes a point where that place becomes acclimatized to, and that place feels comfortable, and risks start to feel uncomfortable, or stepping out of comfort zone seems to be synonymous with risk, fear, and then it brings up deeper layers of fear or other layers of fear. And what I would say is, as much as it is important to learn peeling back the onion and alchemizing and going deep and doing the shadow work and doing the deep dive, it is equally important not to spend forever there, because the void is all there is. It's huge. You could spend a lifetime there. You could spend you could spend eternity there. And what I found is that you'll always be shown more layers. And for someone like me who was like, let's dig in. Okay, if this is the work, let's go. And I ran full force at it, and then went into a bit of like a slumber, a little, apathetic slumber, and felt fairly numb. Like I ran and basically I was dragged there several times while I was not conscious of the process. And then I willingly ran into it. And then I stayed there for a long time. And then I realized that I was starting to forget what it felt like to be productive, to be in the masculine movement, to be in the getting stuff done and enjoying getting stuff done. And I started to feel like getting stuff done was now a bit of a problem. So I started to realize that I had to harmonize the two. I had to synthesize the two. I had to make sure this was a tandem experience, a balanced experience, that I wasn't seeing one as better or worse than the other, and that I understood how they worked together. And this is where the balanced masculine and the feminine fluorescence and the harmonized human courses have all been born from, is this direct experience and esoteric research and experience of other people and pattern recognition and symbolic hero's journey and understanding the phases and journaling over them and watching them for 4 years and beyond, because once I started journaling on them, I could reflect on the ones that I wasn't conscious of, but now I can see the pattern so boldly in them from the time I was a teenager and beyond, from becoming a mother, from getting married and feeling all of the feelings that came with identity change and shift. And my goodness. So I guess what I'm saying is, you'll always be doing self-discovery and expansion. And if you go at them like the pro who wants to, like, I'm clearing all of it now, know that there's a certain level that you clear for functionality, for optimal experience, but then you will just as equally be beckoned back out to the world of acting and action and intuitive action and inspired action and moving towards a new desire. And thank God we have desire. Thank God desire comes and pulls us from the state of contemplation and pulls us from potential complacency. That desire is the fire that wakes us up and rouses us again to the next experience. And it's so funny because, as I say, I've reflected on, from the full moon from Friday until now, I had several experiences where I could have just as easily stayed comfortable. And I was shown where I was like, I had a rule, like something as simple as my son wanting to go skiing on Sunday night. Now, I learned skiing when I was younger. I didn't ski for like 10, 15 years. I've gone skiing like every couple of years, and it's once. And he just like loved it, went with school, loved it. Mom, I want to go. Had some plans with some friends that fell through, and he was like, can we just go? And it was so short notice. And I was like, well, like, oh, your brother's just getting home. I've made up all these excuses for like dinner, and I've been in my PJs, and I was like planning on this kind of day, and I still have to do XYZ. And I put up every silly little roadblock in the way of it. And then I realized so at first I was like, whoa, all these roadblocks must mean that like it's not for me. And I was like, come on. And then it was like, oh, okay, there's a deeper aspect of me that does want to do this, that it is for me. And I got myself ready very quickly. We got dinner. Everything fell into place. Like when I tell you everything fell into place like this, the silkiest like slipstream of This is for you. This is for you. And when I say everything fell into place, like I was thinking, oh, well, we're going to go and there's not going to be enough time. We're going to get there. It's going to be late and then it's going to be closing. And is this even worth it? And, just a bunch of little things came up. We left. We decided, okay, we'll get a quick dinner. We'll get like smoothies and chili from this little place that we go to. And that happened. And it was great. And it happened easily. The smoothie was great. We had the chili together. We had it sort of, just as we pulled into the parking lot. We go in, they help us right away. Everybody's so polite. Everybody's complimentary. Like, when you're just in a vibe, you're having a great day. Everybody's having a great day. And there was just so many confirmations, like, keep going, keep going. And I kept thinking, like, and to think this felt like an inconvenience or like, too much of a stretch out of my comfort zone. So sometimes the comfort zone isn't like, I'm going to do something scary and I feel nervous. Sometimes the comfort zone is like, it's Sunday night and I could stay warm in front of my fire. And so anyway, we get all our stuff, we get moving to the hill. We realize, oh, time's actually not going by so fast. Like we talked to every person that worked there, was just such a great person to talk to, genuinely happy about their job. Like I'm asking for my kids, like, how do you like your job? What do you do here? All of them so happy, so helpful. We get out onto the hill, we start skiing. It's fantastic. I'm seeing the full moon. The weather is perfect. It's not freezing cold. It's actually quite warm. The snow is great. I'm like, I normally don't go on like the bigger hills because it's been so long for me, and that all the stories show up again. And my son's like, I want to go on this one. And he's just so brave. And he's always so brave when it comes to these things. And he's a natural athlete and he picks things up. And he just, Mom, can we go on this hill? And for whatever reason, it's just so easy to say yes. And the small voices of no are just that. They're so small and they're so insignificant and they don't even matter. And so I keep expanding. And it was such an interesting, like mini session for me to witness in a very small and inconspicuous way. My blinders that prevent me from seeing opportunity, my little stories that keep me comfortable and cozy. And again, it's like, it's only skiing on a Sunday night. It's not a big, there's so many people that were there. There's so many kids that were there. I'm like, what a great thing for kids to do, that just like go out on their own. And some of you like are in the ski world and you know this and you're like, yeah, it's not a big deal. You go skiing on a Sunday night. But for me, I'm like, oh, we got to make lunches. We got to, whatever. I had my whole like structure. And it was so enjoyable. We went on every single hill. Ones that I was looking at them when we first got there and like, no, not doing that. Every single hill. I loved every single aspect of it. My son like got back up again. I want to do this jump. Let's go down this hill. Will you get a video of me? He must have said 100 times, I'm just enjoying this so much. This is so nice. And it was just me and him. We don't like, I have 2 sons. So sometimes I don't get the most alone time with one of them one-on-one. Like, I mean, I do, but anyway, this was an incredible night because we just got to be with each other. And it was how it was supposed to be. Like in the pinnacle of my hopes and dreams to just spend present one-on-one time with my kids, that was it. That was like gold standard. It was incredible. It was the best. I'm like looking at the time and I'm like, ooh, I must have just looked fast at the time. And then we get on the chairlift and my son asked one of the guys what time it was and he told us and I'm like, oh shoot, are you sure? And then we looked again. I was thinking it was an hour later than it was. So again, in some weird way, it felt like we got gifted an hour. And like whatever, the time was the time, but it felt like we got gifted an hour suddenly. And he's like, oh my God, we have this much time. Then we did a few more hills and he's like, if it's this time, by the time we do this hill, we can do this one, this way. So he's planning out which hills we were doing next. And it just felt like time slowed down for us. And he goes, normally when they say when you're having fun, time goes fast, time goes by when you're having fun. And he said, but I feel like this is going by slow. And I said, I think it's because we're both here and we're both really paying attention and we're both really present and we're both really enjoying it. And it was so special. It was so incredible. Everything about the night was easy. It was even down to the, like, we get there and they're like, oh, you're going with him. He came with his school. Yeah. You don't have to pay for your skis. You don't have to pay for your lift ticket. What? Pardon me. Like just even not the big, not the thing, not the biggest deal, but the fact that like just green light, green light, green light. easy access, easy in, easy way. Like, as I said, slipstream, silky river. And I really got shown like, oh my goodness, some of these things are like knee walls, and I'm looking at them like huge prison walls, and they're not. They're just like simple, like step over the curb, make the decision to switch the lane. Like, it's not the biggest deal. Change isn't always this horrible process or this like big arduous process, or I've got to dig a new road for myself. Like, sometimes it's just as easy as moving over. So anyway, my whole weekend was stacked with little things like that kept showing me ways in which I could embrace the season that I'm in and embrace the change. And I've been feeling for a long time, okay, like it's time to get active. It's time to get moving. It's time to get busy again. I think for a bit I was trying to feel what that would feel like, so that when I balanced the masculine was still moving. And when I worked with the feminine was still present and still given space to be there and be integrated. And I knew what balance looked like. I knew what harmonization looked like. I knew what I wanted it to feel like. I was practicing. And it just feels like it's time. It's time. It's like getting pushed out of the nest a little bit. Like, it's time for me to make more moves, go forward more fully. And what perfect timing than recognizing that we're in the next 4-year cycle starting tomorrow. So I had another episode slated for Monday, but I was like, I want to record this today in the energy of February 28th, the last day of the last 4-year cycle, in reflection of the last 4-year cycle. And after I read that like poem, story, whatever, musing, channeling, that guidance for myself, like, even as I channeled it, even as I wrote it, I understood it on one level, but I certainly didn't feel into the depths of what it really fully meant to me until I kept moving forward. And I looked at it a few times in the past, but I really haven't looked at it in the past 3 years. So pulling it up, like in the month that I wrote it, I looked at it a few times. And I mean, those have been echoing through my work the whole time. If you listen to the season 1 and season 2, these are perspectives that echo throughout it. But this was like a download that was specifically for me to be like, take it easy, take it in stride. Nothing's wrong. All is okay. You asked for this. Here it is. This is the unfolding of it. You know, your human expectations sometimes don't allow you to see the gift in the moment. And here it is. And then that was like reflected back to me one more time in the sweetest way on Sunday, and a few more times this week as well, I have to say. But anyway, this is something I wanted to share again, as this is my journal for transformation. I enjoy sharing this with you in hopes that it helps you find where you are, find your footing, recognize that this is part of the process, feel normal in it, not feel wrong in it, not feel disempowered, and to find your own steady footing and find your own lush tropical garden inside, grow your own lush tropical garden. And even if your inside feels like a barren desert, or your inside feels a bit rocky and dark, or your inside feels meh, you're always working on it. You're always transforming it. You're always developing it. And it can be whatever you want it to be, especially when we're doing the work on the inside, the energetic realm on the inside. It is literally yours to create with your imagination. You get to have it. You get to make it your space, just like you get to make your home your space. But in here, there's like no limits. It's all you. Nobody can tell you what it's supposed to look like. Nobody should tell you what it's supposed to look like. You get to decide. So I hope this finds you well. I hope that you get to contemplate the next 4-year context chunk of time. And I hope you make great strides in that time. I am Ashley Jowett of Femist on Instagram @Femist. If you want to look me up, send me a message, connect with me. I offer one-on-one sessions. I am in the process of creating courses and group offerings. Hit me up. Have a great day.